the uniqueness, the link, and the impact last week, but we never really talked about what you can do in an impact to make it stand out. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. The impact is the final result in your internal link chain, right? So we talked about how you can have like links followed by another link, or internal link followed by another internal link that finally leads to the impact, which is the conclusion of your argument. So there's something called impact calculus, and we call it impact calc for short. And it's this concept where you're comparing and weighing your impacts between your opponents and your case. So you want to compare the final unrefuted impact, right? So both of you might have different impacts. Maybe you have the same impact, a different like way of reaching that impact. But either way, you're going to have like something to weigh against your partner. And the way to win a debate round through the impacts is to have it either unrefuted or to have it like more heavily weighed than the other person's. You want to make sure that you make it very clear why your impact is much more important than whatever your opponent said. So you're going to assume that if the impact happens, all of it will, there's no mitigation. So, well, actually, I don't like the word assume, because that just kind of seems like everything could be an impact. You can't just assume that something will happen. You have to make sure that there are links that link to the impact based on your case, right? But I think what it means by assume is you're going to assume that that chain of events happens and the impact will happen. And that's kind of what you're premising the whole debate on. And it's important for the judge to know what you want to do, right? So you want to make sure that you instruct the judge and give the judge information of what they should prioritize. For example, should they prioritize the quality of life, or like the number of people who live, right? So that could be like a difference that you want the judge to know about in a debate round. So impact calc has like three parts to it. There's the first part, which is the magnitude. It's the size and the scope of your impact. And an example of this would be US-China war outweighs economic decline on magnitude. It's a global war between two nuclear powers that draws in other regional powers and escalates hotspots, right? We heard this in the debate on Monday. Talking about in the 2020 argument that they made, right? So this is where it's talking about the size of this problem. If H-1B visas, something happens to the H-1B visa and it like shrinks in size, or if it grows in size, whatever side you're on, it leads to an impact of this, right? In this case, it's saying that it would lead to a US-China war that will lead to that outweighs the economic decline that the other side might be like running as their impact, right? Because ultimately war is more impactful than an economic decline, because of its magnitude, right? It's more important because more numbers are involved. There's more people involved in a war than there is in an economic decline. And if it affects more people in a much larger way. So that could be one part of the impact calc that you're going for. Yeah, so economic decline stops short of war, right? The second part to the impact calc equation, I guess you could call that, is time frame. So you want to explain to the judge how quickly the impact will happen, right? If it's 100 years in the future, why should we care about this impact right now, right? It doesn't have, if it's like that far away, then it shouldn't be an impact because there's no really any problem with prioritizing something else at the moment, right? So that's something you want to consider. You want to explain how rapidly something will escalate, such as the US-China war. Like if H-1B visas are like limited, it will lead to a US-China war, because it will escalate to a war in a very short amount of time. So you want to make sure that the time frame is set for that kind of thing. Right, so here's an example of that again. US-China war outweighs economic decline. On time frame, tensions are already high now and inflamed by COVID-19. So it tells you that because there's already a problem there, and if you make it more pronounced by uh, like not absolving the H-1B visa problem, then it will lead to the US-China war. And the third part to impact calculus is probability, right? So you have magnitude, you have time frame, and you have probability. So what probability is, it's how likely something will happen, right? And it's kind of like math. Economic decline is much more probable than a US-China war, right? There's a larger uh, percentage of chance that an economic decline will happen because economic decline isn't necessarily dictated by a government, right? It's dictated by everyone in the economy. Whereas on the other hand, US-China war, that has to be a deliberate decision on both parts by both parties. And historically, uh, wars don't usually just happen, right? There must be a large trigger for that. And the probability of an H-1B visa triggering this war is very improbable. So that might be an argument you make on the other side. Okay. So those are the those are the three parts of the impact calc, so probability, magnitude, and time frame. Before I go into questions, I'll give you some tips on how you can do an impact calc, right? So what you want to do is you always want to give active comparisons. And what this looks like is you want to personalize your arguments to the other person's impacts, right? And that means like you want to weigh your impact in such a way that it connects with the other person's arguments. You don't want to just be singularly focused on your impacts, because then it gives the judge no weighing mechanism, right? If you just say my impact of economic decline is better than war, it's like, why would that happen, right? So you have to explain it through impact calc. It is a better impact because it is more probable to happen, and therefore it's much more important to the status quo. um, it does not always have to be like a terminal impact. What that means is like it does not always have to be like the end all be all and kind of impact in of itself, right? It could be you can compare it to internal links. um, Say your internal link to war is economic decline, right? Then you can say, well, economic decline leads to war. So that could be something that you can say in your speech. For example, the probability of US getting to economic decline versus the probability of an action escalating US-China war. So when you're giving a speech, or when you're giving your summary or final focus, or even in your constructive speeches, you want to give the judge a reason to prioritize your impact in comparison to your opponent's impacts. And it usually comes down to magnitude, time frame, and probability, right? Those are the three major things that basically dictate whether an impact is much more important um, than another. So if your impact is obviously losing on time frame, tell the judge that the only thing that matters is magnitude and amount of deaths it will cause, right? If you're if your problems, such as economic decline, is happening 10 years or 20 years in the future, and it's not happening right now, and your opponent's is happening within the next 5 years, then they're winning on time frame, right? Because it's happening more immediately. In that sense, you're not going to want to argue for time frame, because that you're trying to fight a losing battle. You want to tell the judge that it doesn't matter because war will impact more people, even if it happens over a longer time frame, right? Or impacts more people, and since magnitude is what you should prioritize in this round, it is ultimately the one that you should pick over time frame, and we shouldn't care about time frame as much as we should care about magnitude because of the number of people affected by it. I think it's stuck. Okay. Oh, is that it? Okay, I think that's the last slide. Um, okay, I'll go back to questions. Does anyone have questions? Oh, wait. I think I have something in the chat. Okay. What if your time frame is bigger, but death is bigger?
Um,
What do you mean, Haley?
Like, say the issue is bigger. Like, say if your opponent's thing is gonna happen in 10 years, but like 5 people die. But or say okay, no. Say your opponent's thing happens in like a week, but one person's gonna die. But your thing's gonna happen in 10 years, but 20 million people are gonna die. Then would you still lose because of the time frame?
No, so yeah, that's a really good point, right? That's what I talked about kind of on my last slide. It was the fact that if you're losing on time frame, right? 10 years is obviously longer than what your opponent is running. Then you
Yeah.
shouldn't be going for time frame. You don't always have to win on all three like impact calculus methods. You don't have to choose all three. You just choose one and you stick to it, right? If you're losing on time frame and it's obvious that you're losing on time frame and you obviously have a much better advantage in magnitude because it affects more people, then you want to run the magnitude argument. You're going to say it doesn't matter that it's going to happen in 10 years. In 10 years, millions will die. It doesn't matter that in five days, like 10 people will be affected. It matters that more people are affected. Doesn't matter the time frame. So that's how you will argue that. So for a problem like that, you would want to make sure that you're impact calculating it so it matches what you're trying to like convey.
Okay.
Oh, Ashley, I think you might have started recording because I didn't. Okay.